Hey, welcome to the Smart Elections Election Protection Forum. We are so delighted that you're here. I'm Lulu Friesdat. I'm the Executive Director of Smart Elections, and we have a really fascinating forum for you tonight. We're going to be talking about when do voting machines count wrong. We know that often they are precise when they're counting correctly, but we also know that there are actually many times when they count incorrectly. And we have a number of examples to show that to you. And I am going to be joined shortly, I think, by our co-host, Bennie Smith, who's got a million balls in the air, but I think that one of them is going to land here with us later on. So I'm just going to check that. We've got some folks in the chat. I see some people on now, and go ahead and throw something in the comments if you can see me and you can hear me, just like, hey, we're here. And that way we'll know that we're actually connecting with you and not just talking to ourselves. It's all about the dialogue. So you're the most important part of it. Great, okay. Hey, Bruce, glad to have you here. Bruce is a font of wisdom, especially regarding to computer science issues. So let's just get a little bit of information in. We are Smart Elections. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit, and we are dedicated to elevating election reform to an urgent national priority, which it absolutely needs to be. And you are a big part of that. And if you want to know more about us, you can go to our website, which is smartelections.us. And if you want to reach us, you can email us at contact@smartelections.us, and we love to get email from you, especially if it's questions that you have or things that you would like to change. We are absolutely into constructive criticism, things that you want to know more about, and we love positive reinforcement also. If you want to tell us the things that you absolutely loved about the forum, that's great, and we usually include those in our emails, so we love to have anything that you found really interesting about the forum, or that you learned, or that you had a good time, or you had fun. Great, please send us those comments at contact@smartelections.us. And then let's just see if there's any other things that we need to cover. We will go into some more stuff later on. We would love it if you would sign up for next week's forum. The best way to stay in touch with us is to these forums, and we have them every 2 weeks. Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern time, and you can sign up for as many as 5 in advance. So go ahead and just go to the Mobilize site and sign up for the next forum, and I'll go ahead and just put that link into the chat. And let's see, that way you should be able to get that, and that's sign up for the next forum. And we have some really interesting stuff in the works. Tonight, we're going to be talking about when voting machines count wrong, but I'm hoping that in 2 weeks, we might be able to talk about a time that it looks like voting machines actually eventually counted correctly. And that is that some very interesting information has come out. Here in New York City, we had a ranked choice voting election. It was our first one, June 22nd, in the primary. And the New York City Board of Elections has now released what are called cast vote records. And those are the actual documents. They're usually spreadsheets that show how the voting machine registered, like how did the voting machine count every single ballot that it received. And you can take those cast vote records, and if you have the same software that the city has, and it's open source software, so it is available to the public, you can actually use the cast vote records to check if the results were accurate. And we had an email exchange with the Ranked Choice Voting Resources Center. That is the organization that actually created the software that was used, the open source software that was used to count the ranked choice votes. And they are actually in the process now of going through and checking that those cast vote records actually did count accurately the way that they were intended to count. And so we're in talks with them to have them come on and just kind of talk us through what they did. And we're also talking to another colleague, Ray Lutz, who is going to try to independently verify the cast vote records on his own software. He has a system called Audit Engine that can also look at usually digital ballot images, but I believe also cast vote records and look at the results. And it looks like Bennie's here, so we're gonna bring him on because it's always more fun when Bennie's here. Bennie's like fun on steroids.
All right.
How are you doing?
Hi, everybody. I'm fresh
Oh
out of traffic.
my God, you're loud. You might turn down just a hair there.
You told me to keep it up last night.
Yeah, well, there's a balance, happy mediums.
Right, right. Am I good now?
I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I'll
Perfect.
try to adjust my volume also.
Okay.
So what do you think about those cast vote records? The New York City released them, and now we're going to be able to take a look at, from a couple different systems and try to compare the way that the city counted.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good step. I think it took a while. You typically want to get those as soon as possible. My concern is always around the ballot images that are the authenticators of the cast vote records. But it's a step in the right direction. Now, independent people like yourself, like our organization, we can take that and compare it to poll tapes and see if everything checks out.
Right. This is a sort of a parallel type of comparison as like the poll tape comparison, where you look at the poll tapes and see if the results were reported the same as they were on election night. And we get an interesting comment here from Laura Chamberlain. You have to make sure you received all the CVRs, but this is a step in the right direction.
Yep,
She's absolutely right about that. Laura runs a really great organization in Chicago. I think it's Clean Count.
Nice.
Clean Count. I forget your county there, Laura, but that's a really cool organization. They do a lot of really great work. So great to have you here, Laura. And we'll keep you posted on that. But that is hopefully what we'll be doing on September 7th. So go ahead and do sign up. I put that link into the chat, and get yourself signed up in advance. And I think we should just dive into it because we got a lot of information to cover. And I'm actually going to be checking my phone because I was in touch with Allison Green today, and she hooked me up with this really great press conference from ESNS that we'll show later on. I can see that she just sent me the time code. So Allison, shout out to you, big love.
Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, she was on our show before, and got a lot of.
She'd be digging.
Just a lot of comments, a lot of energy around the work that she's doing. And we're continuing to work with her to explore the results in Kentucky from 2020. We've done public records requests now, and we're trying to follow up with that. We had a heck of a time getting them to respond to our public records requests. And so we're trying to dig in there and figure out how to move forward with that. But we do expect to be working further with Allison as well. So shout out to her. So I think the order that I'd like to take these in, we have, I believe, 5 examples that we want to talk about, instances where voting machines counted incorrectly, where there's really no question about it. The evidence shows that the machine counted wrong. And we're not talking about hacking. We're not talking about any sort of malware as far as we know. We're talking about often just either mechanical issues or issues where election officials have conducted the protocols incorrectly, have not taken all the steps they needed to take, or took wrong steps or missteps, and it caused the machines to count wrong. So I think the first one that I want to start with is Windham Hill. This was an audit in Windham, New Hampshire. And this was an audit that just took place a few months ago, and it was conducted by 3 individuals, experts who have a fair amount of respect in the election security community. It was primarily conducted by Hari Hursty. He is an internationally respected hacker and security expert. He was assisted by Philip Stark, who is a professor of statistics at the University of California, Berkeley, and also Mark Lindeman, who is the acting director right now at Verified Voting. And what's really interesting about what happened in Windham, New Hampshire, is that there was a concern that the machines had counted wrong because the machine count did not match when they did their audit, their initial audit, and it was off by quite a bit. I believe it was off by about 400 votes. And so there was a great deal of concern in the community, and they actually went to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General and I believe the Secretary of State there collectively reached out and wound up hiring these 3 auditors. It was a sort of complicated process. I think one person, I think the Attorney General picked one auditor and someone else picked a third auditor and another team picked, each of the auditors was picked by a different party in New Hampshire. So they tried to get a balanced team. They still did get a lot of pushback in terms of the way the audit proceeded. I watched videos of people who, no matter how transparent they were still upset, were still frustrated. And I know Hari spent a tremendous amount of energy really trying to make it as transparent as possible. He had a live stream going that I believe was up most of the time, except, you know, I think occasionally the cameras did go down. But what came out of this is that the reason why the voting machines counted incorrectly was because of two mechanical errors. And one turned out to be that the machines had a lot of paper dust in them. And that just seems crazy, like something that people would do, that they would just clean out their machines from paper dust. But literally
paper dust on my Twitter handle.
They blew compressed air through these machines. And actually, I'm going to put the link in the chat of Hari's talk at DEF CON, because it's really worth watching. It's about an hour-long talk that he did, and he goes through in detail. And I'm kind of spoiling his punchline, I have to say. This is Hari Hursty DEF CON talk on the Windham, New Hampshire audit. And he goes through it in a really fun way. It's like a murder mystery. And he's like, then we did this and tried to figure out this, and then we did this and we tried to figure out this. It was a real detective event. They really had to go carefully and just step by step try to figure out what the problem was. But I want to show you these photos that he did put these on Twitter, and it shows these results before and after they ran the compressed air through it. And it's really remarkable. So let me know, are you seeing that?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to try to blow it up as big as I can for you, because it's the middle section that you really want to look at. So in this middle section, on the left is before they put compressed air through this machine, and you can see there's 200 blanks. A blank is what's called like an undervote. That means that the machine just doesn't register any vote for that race.
The person
and
skipped.
200, well, in theory, the person skipped, or for some reason, the machine didn't register the vote. And then I'm going to roll you over to the one after they cleaned the machine, and there you're going to see that 208 came down to 140. So that's 68 more ballots that got counted after they blew compressed air through the machine. So this is just basic maintenance that we're talking about that caused a very large discrepancy. This is, you know, for one race, you can see that there's not that many votes to begin with. It looks like the other candidates are getting about, and the other candidates too, also the votes went up 23. They each got 40 instead of 23. So in a race where candidates are getting 40 votes, to miscount over 60 votes, that's huge. That's game changing. So this is just, you know, basic maintenance. And then the other thing that they found that also was really fascinating is that there was a fold in some of the ballots. And it turned out that the fold was a very firm fold. And the reason why the fold was such a crisp, hard fold was that the election officials had borrowed a document folder from the DMV. They were trying to be efficient, and they were having to spend a lot of time, because this is the pandemic, more time than usual, folding ballots. And they thought, great, we'll go get a ballot folder from the DMV. And so they folded these in a very firm way. And the reason why that turned out to be a problem was that when the scanner saw that fold, it actually created a shadow. And the shadow was interpreted as a vote. So let me pull this up now. And this is from Hari's talk. And you can just see how much of a shadow it was. Look at that. Benny, are you seeing that?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge. And the machine doesn't know what that is. It thinks it's a vote. The scanners register, they don't really register. You can see that fold is going directly through the middle of the circle of the bubble there.
It's almost like a right mark.
The scanner's
Because of the
registering.
indention, the scanner will pick that up as a mark.
It's registering that as a vote. Kathy is asking here, does it make sense that all 4 candidates got the same number of votes? I think that this was one of those situations where you vote for 5 or you vote, or you vote for 4. So I think it did actually make sense the way that in terms of that particular race. I don't think there's anything unusual about that. But they were able to determine that the reason why this election was completely off was because of these 2 mechanical issues. And again, as far as they could tell, there was no malware, there was no hacking involved. These were mechanical errors and some just errors in terms of the election officials not really knowing what the effects of some of the actions that they were taking were. And I'm not quite sure what this question means from Bruce. Picking it up depends on the threshold required.
I think you said a threshold of the number of errors before it alerts you that you need to check something. I guess that could be. He can clarify, Bruce, if we're not interpreting correctly. But that's what it sounds like to me. That when do you know that you need to look for something like this?
Well, in New Hampshire, I believe that they do an audit afterwards. And so I think it was their initial audit that caught that there was a 400 vote discrepancy. I'd have to actually go back and double check on that. I was focused mostly on the mechanical errors and not sort of what led up to the audit. So I'd have to go back and double check. But that's my understanding, is that they had an initial audit, they found discrepancies, and they wanted an explanation for why these discrepancies existed. So that's New Hampshire. And I think one of the things that in all of these instances that really troubles me is that these are instances where there were huge discrepancies. And so people noticed, right? The race was off by 400 votes when they counted by hand versus the machine. People were like, hey, what's up with that? But I think what we don't know is how many times machines are off by smaller amounts, by 5% or 10%. And because we are actually not auditing very robustly in many locations, we may not catch that. And we actually may not know how often machines are counting incorrectly. And that is something that is of grave concern to me. And that is one of the reasons why I'm presenting this information to you, so that you can be more aware of this. We absolutely have to be pushing for really robust audits. And that means audits that are thorough enough and look at enough ballots by hand that we actually will have strong confidence that if there are any problems, that if the results are reported incorrectly, we will catch those. And that could be any number of audits. It could be a full hand count audit, a modified hand count audit, a risk limiting audit that is done correctly and with, in my opinion, no more than a 5% risk limit. So that would be like a 95% risk limit. We really need to up our audit game. And that's one of the main messages that I want you to take away from this episode. Audits, audits, audits are the solution for all of these problems, whether they're from hacking or from mechanical errors or from human errors. We've got to be checking those results. Oh, I see. Bruce is saying, if the circle is not fully black, how black does it need to be? It is a tunable value. It has to be. That is actually true.
Yeah.
You want to feel that, Betty?
Yeah, I think the technology, it's supposed to interpret a lot of things. And I think for a fold, that will show up like a mark. If you guys ever like took made a copy of something and it had fold marks in there, it interprets it as black ink almost. You look at it, it's picked up on the scanner, that's black. So I think this one would even get past a threshold that says the bubble needs to be at least 20% filled in or something like that. He's saying thresholds for how far is the circle filled in before you count it or decide that something needs to be looked
The reason why I'm aware of those thresholds is because we had that question come up in Georgia. That was something that became apparent when they got their new voting system, which is the Dominion X, the system they're using in Georgia now. And one of the women that we interviewed, Jean Dufort, she was on the committee that was observing the audits, and they could tell that the machine was not reading valid votes over and over again. There were valid votes that weren't being read, and it turned out that the setting was too high. It had been set for, I don't know what the threshold was actually, that they had set it out in Georgia, but it was too high. And so actual valid votes were just literally not being counted by the machine. So that is yet another indication. Like, we're talking about 5 examples that we listed in the promo materials where machines counted wrong, but that is certainly a 6th one. We know of actual instances where the machine was programmed to too high of a threshold and valid votes were not counted. And they never did go back and catch those. Jean told us that in most of the counties, they just moved on and they never went back and found those valid votes. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, Bruce. That's a great point.
Yeah, another thing for Bruce, we usually hear about that with signature verification. That's typically the time we hear about a threshold, but it definitely is to register to vote too.
And Matt, one of our listeners here, is saying they are generally set as a default between 12 to 17%, depending on the system. Right, you don't want it too low, because then if somebody just like accidentally sneezes on the ballot and there's a little, spot of spit there, maybe that could get registered as a vote or an overvote somehow. Here we've got other people in Milwaukee. Any discernible mark within the circle will be tabulated. So apparently, it varies state to state. Excuse me. I want to move on now, and we're going to talk about the next example where machines counted incorrectly. And this one is in Antrim County, Michigan. And this one got a tremendous amount of notoriety. So I'm imagining that most of you probably have in fact heard about this. It was a huge deal because in Antrim County, Michigan, in the 2020 presidential election, the voting machines counted 6,000 votes that were supposed to be cast for Trump. Those votes went to Biden in the initial count, and it turned out that the machine was programmed incorrectly. So I'm going to talk you through this right now. And this is really fascinating, a little bit complicated, but absolutely worth sort of digging into the weeds on. So the best information that I have about this is from a very detailed report that J. Alex Halderman did on this. And I'm going to put that link into the chat also. It's a long and dense article or report that he made. Not everybody is going to have an appetite for that, but if you do and you like original research, this is the Halderman report on Antrim County, Michigan. And I am going to try to pull that up for you now because there's just a one page. We absolutely don't have time to go through the whole thing, but there's one page in particular that I want to take a look at. So he starts out by just saying he went back and looked at the problems and basically tried to recreate the steps that the election officials have gone through. And he lays this out in a pretty clear way in terms of what he found the problem was. And again, I'm going to try to blow this up big for you. This is on page 11 of the report, and I'm going to walk us through some of this now. Again, this is J. Alex Halderman's report on the incorrect tabulation, the vote machines counting incorrectly in Antrim County, Michigan. And let's see how big that came up. Let's see if you guys are going to be able to read that. I'm going to try to blow this up a little bit bigger for you. I think that is probably pretty big. I think you guys can probably see that pretty well. So what he says is, I reconstruct the events that led to the errors, explain their causes, and verify that they have been corrected. And we actually know that they were corrected because all of those ballots in Antrim County, Michigan, were counted by hand in a public, transparent process. And we actually had one of the election officials who oversaw that audit or helped with the audit, Tina Barton, came and talked to us about that process. And it was a transparent process. And she was quite confident that they eventually did get the correct results. And she's an extremely reliable election official, tremendous integrity. She works with the Election Assistance Commission now. And so I have strong confidence that this was corrected. But the way that it went wrong was really interesting. So here's what Professor Halderman says happens. He says the county received initial proofs of the ballot designs from Election Source on September 5th. So Election Source is going to be the company that makes these designs for them. And one of the things that's really important to understand about this process, and Benny, maybe you can help us understand this. There's two different places where the ballot has to match. There's a ballot design in the scanner, and then there's another area in the election management system. And if those two images are not mirror images of each other that absolutely match, then the scanner is not going to count correctly because it's going to be off and it's going to count votes for the wrong candidate. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit, Benny?
Yeah, I fall out, when we had the Barton on, she's an incredibly thorough election official. One of the best I've seen. I've, as an election official, I'm literally polling people to see who really gets this stuff, with some domain expertise. I still fall out on this. It could be that we're using direct recording electronics here. I don't get Halderman's example. I didn't get it then. I still don't get it now. When you set up the election definition, you set that up in the source, and then that's transferred to the machines. I don't know of any way that if you set it up incorrectly, that it's going to swap votes. I don't. That doesn't comport with any reality that I've seen. I just don't get it.
So let's walk through it and see, because I think he explains it pretty well. And
I've seen it. I've read it. Like, I take him at his word, because unlike many other people who write about this subject, he has used a DRE machine that we use now, and he's programmed one to count incorrectly. So, I'll take him at his word for it. I don't get it. I can read it over and over again. I still don't get it.
Okay,
doesn't make it wrong. I just don't get it.
All right. I will say it does make sense to me, and I'm going to just keep moving through his report, see if it's still big. Yeah, it's still pretty big there. So what he says basically is that the county received the initial proofs of the ballot designs from Election Source on September 5th. So that means they got their ballot from this company that created the ballot for them. And after a series of corrections, the county staff approved the designs on September 18th and then received a flash drive from that company, Election Source, containing the election package on September 29th. County staff loaded the election package into the election management system. So now they basically have taken that ballot design and they put it into their computers that are going to tally the votes for them, that are going to tabulate. That's the election management system. And they copied the election definition files for the scanners and ballot marking devices to removable media, those are flash drives, and distributed the media to the localities for use in the election. So basically they put their ballot designs into their computers, and then they took a copy of those and they sent them out to all their machines. The memory card logs show that townships loaded the media into their scanners and ballot marking devices and performed logic and accuracy testing on various dates in October. Now, typically, the ballot designs and election definitions would have remained unchanged from this point on. Excuse me. However, according to Antrim's timeline, on October 5th and 7th, the county alerted Election Source about errors that had been identified in 3 of the ballot designs. And that affected these various townships. Election Source, that's their company, applied the corrections and provided a revised election package on October 23rd. And then the election project log shows that Antrim loaded the revised election package into its EMS that day. Now, here's what he says. At this point, the county staff should have updated the removal media for every scanner and ballot marking device in the county to ensure that their election definition matched the election management systems. So basically, they needed to make sure that the ballots that they were voting on and that the ballot scanners and ballot marking devices were looking at were the same as what was in their computers. But they didn't do that. This is according to Halderman's report.
I agree with that part.
Okay, and he says this would prove to be a consequential mistake. And so what I want to do now is look at two different documents that he includes in his report that are pretty interesting. One is a photograph. I'm sorry, my throat is so scratchy today. It was fine all day, but I don't know why it's really dusty in here now.
I mean, COVID is.
No, I already had COVID.
You already had it. Me too. I was in New York last week, so.
You got when did you get COVID, Benny?
I got COVID in 2019, before everybody knew it was COVID.
I didn't know that. My husband and I both had it in March of in 2019. You got it? You got it early.
Yeah, December 2019. I went to the doctor 2 days in a row, and I told him the flu test was broke, and to test me again.
Wow, we got it in March.
Me had an ear infection. No.
So did you get antibodies? Did you get tested and you had antibodies?
No, I didn't go get tested for it. I was fairly aware of what COVID was. I don't even get sick, and I was down with like a 104 temp for like 4 days.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really bad for me.
Wow. Okay, so that's the hashes, and this is the these are the ballot images. So I want to walk through this document pretty carefully that he put up, and I didn't know that you had COVID. Sorry to hear that.
All right, that's all right then. I'm good.
You have my full sympathy. It was no fun.
No, it wasn't. Okay,
so let's see if this is sharing now. Are you seeing this? Okay, so I'm going to, again, try to blow this up pretty big. Sorry, my computer's trying to open a bunch of stuff. Don't know why. Okay, let's see if I can blow this up. See if you guys get the same image blown up. Okay, great. So let's take a look at this. So this is what Halderman says happened, because keep in mind that they updated their election management system, but they did not update their machines. So here he says, Central Lake Precinct 1B ballot was modified to reflect the correct school board contest. This necessitated inserting an additional write-in blank. So they adjusted the ballot on one side. But then what happened, this insertion incremented the ID number of every subsequent voting target. So remember that, and I think we sort of started to talk about this a little bit when we were talking about the folds and how the folds were picking up a fold as a mark. Remember that the scanners, they're just machines, and they're not actually even seeing a bubble. What they are looking at are coordinates on a grid, basically. And if you look at your ballot, there's like little marks on the side of it. They're called timing marks, and they create a grid. And if Bennie is running for an office and I'm running for an office, so he might be on the grid at A3 and I might be on the grid at B3. But if that grid gets off, then all of a sudden, in this case, they give each one of those coordinates a number. Like Bennie's number might be 956 and my number might be 957, but they get off. All of a sudden, you wanted to vote for Bennie at 956, and instead you wound up voting for me at 957. So this is where things got off. And then if you go up here to the top, he says, in alphabetically later townships, the change in Central Lake incremented the ID for every choice. So you can see on the left, he's comparing, I believe,
the original.
I I'm not sure which one is which. One of them is the adjusted ballot, and one of them is the original ballot. So you can see that they're different numbers in the machine, in the scanners and the ballot marking devices and the election management system. And then,
so I never seen this. This one is more reasonable, but I still come to the same conclusion. Like that means every race below the blank was wrong.
yeah, there were a lot of races that were wrong.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah, but I only heard that the presidential race was wrong.
No, there were many races that were wrong.
Everything has to be wrong. Everything cascades. So
if
one is shifted, then every race is wrong.
And
but this just inherently describes why these systems are elementary. Because if you look at the oval and you pull OCR, you still get Donald Trump. That's the reason why I said we in our regular discussions, you asked me if I was designing a system, what would I do? I said I would look at the oval and I would go and extract the name that's next to it.
So you would design a voting machine in a complete.
I would not make it do this at all. I would go and see that dot and I would go pull Donald J. Trump, Michael R. Pence, Republican. And I would bring that text back to me.
So what we need to do is hire Bennie to design some voting machines.
Like you need optical character recognition. Like all these IDs and somebody swapping a file. It's a time bomb waiting to happen.
Well, it did happen. It wasn't waiting to happen. It did happen. So this is what happened. You can see that 969 and 970 were out of alignment. So people were, and what he says here, a scanner using the initial definition records, this Trump vote as a scanner using the initial definition record records this Trump vote as ID 970.
It's got the ID. Yeah.
Right. So that's how the ballots were initially before they were changed. But the EMS, using the revised definition, reports ID 970 as a vote for Biden. And there you had it. 6,000 votes that were supposed to be cast for Trump wound up being recorded on the election management system for Biden. And that
there
is
are so many alarm bells that go off in my head when I see this, though.
So that's when you see that the voting machines are not counting correctly. And again, I go back to the question that I raised previously, which is how many times is this happening on a smaller scale and we're not aware of it? This is something that
if I want this to happen for real, I just insert a write-in blank in the race before that, and take a write-in blank in the race below that, and then I only affect that one, and I get everything I want.
Well, this obviously was not done well. And there were a lot of places where people missed mistakes. So this is what happened. And I want to show you one other thing that I think is really interesting. And this is what's called a hash. And we hear about these hashes. And I know when I heard about hashes, and that they really didn't make much sense to me initially. It's really taken me a while to sort of absorb what is a hash. A hash is a term that is used for a string of numbers that tells you that something is what it is. And if that string of numbers changes, then you know that that object or that document or the data in that document has changed. So a hash is used as a security device often to say, this document is the same document that I thought it was because the hash, the string of numbers, is the same as it was. Or this piece of software is the same software that I thought it was because the hash is the same. And one of the things that we had heard about previously, this is a tangent, but we know that the ESNS systems in Texas, the hash wasn't working for their software. So even if their software had been changed, the hash still said that there was no problem. So there was no way of knowing whether or not the software in those ESNS systems in Texas in the 2020 election was actually the correct software because they went ahead and used it anyway.
Yeah,
so,
if you see the comments from Lynn Bernstein and, hey, Lynn, I ain't heard from you in a long time. Text me, Lynn. And Bob, this is, they're drilling into the design of the system. That's the best method. Like you got Lynn Bernstein, she's agreeing here. OCR is the way you pull the name, and it doesn't matter who did the file, right, wrong, or indifferent. You're counting names at that point. That's what the human eye sees. That's what's documented in the paper, and you can resolve that when you do a hand count.
So just to be clear for people, and this is we're kind of jumping topics here. Bruce's comment: consider a hash to be a secret.
No, he's got one above. It's a comment above. It's him and Lynn Bernstein.
I know, but let me just don't get me too confused, Bennie. let me just move through this.
Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
Bruce says, consider a hash to be a secure signature of a digital file. He's just helping us understand what that is. But backtracking a little bit to what we were talking about previously, when Bennie was saying, really, there are better ways of designing voting systems. So they're not working off this grid and matching numbers. And Lynn's just agreeing with Bennie. It would just pull the OCR, that's optical character recognition. That's when computers can read text, basically. Right. It would pull the optical character recognition text next to the filled-in bubble. So it would actually be sort of reading the ballot instead of the way that the scanners work now. And Bennie and Lynn are in agreement that that would be a better system. I have no idea. I don't know enough about it. But
yeah, Siri can figure out slang. So surely we should be able be able to pull some text off.
Okay, so but I want to show you how these hashes were off, because they were off. All of them except for 4 were off. And again, this is just remarkable to see. They have these security systems in place, and apparently nobody looked at the hashes. So I guess they didn't know the hashes were telling them that the ballots were wrong. Am I still here, or did I just log out? No, I'm still here. Okay.
We're all gone if you log out.
I know. That scared me for a minute. I want to show you these hashes. And again, this is a little bit dense, but I'm going to blow it up big, and I'm going to try to see if you can follow along with me. So there are only 4 of these hashes that actually match. And Halderman has gone to the trouble of highlighting this for us and really pointing it out. So if it's in highlight, it matches. And it says, he says, initial package and revised package. And look at that string of numbers, and you can see that first one. Even if you just look at the last 3 digits, A5D, A5D, they match. But look at the next one. The second one is from a different precinct, Central Lake. And that one, look at the last 3 digits, they're not matching. 8F5 and 7F6. So you know the definition.
The whole hash is different.
You know, that's telling you your election management system and your ballot design files don't match. This was a warning that nobody saw and nobody paid attention to. And if you look down here, look at the left column and look at the right column, and you will see almost none of them match. There's only 4 that match. And I think I can blow that up a little bit bigger. So the left side is the initial. You see this, 6C4, C4F, A1E, 3BD. These aren't matching. You have to go all the way down here, even further, to find any other ones that match. I think there were 4 total, he said, that actually matched.
Yes, blue, well, I think it was white all the way across.
I'm not seeing any others that match.
It's probably got a couple pages.
Yeah, this may not be a complete list, but we can see that there are 2 up there at the top. There's 1 actually that does match. And so that was in Banks. So that, you know, again, systems that are in place are not being followed, and it's clear that we had mistakes, and the mistakes led to votes being counted incorrectly. And Bruce is also commenting that they're not very good hashes. They're too small, so they're not.
Yeah, that's right.
But what difference does it make how great they are if they're not using?
Because you can Google tools that'll automatically get those hashes.
I want to get to some other examples because we have some other examples besides these 2. And so just before we move on to the other stuff, I do want to mention that we are fundraising. And so we'll just take a little time to say, hey, if you think our work is important, really, there are very few other organizations that are doing this, that are bringing this work to you in a very user-friendly way, week after week, forum after forum. We're here. We're also doing public oversight work. We have another sister organization that's working on legislation. We're here doing this work every day. And if you really believe in that and you want to help us keep going, please do take the time to make a donation. And if you can't make a donation, please do what you can to talk to other people who you think maybe could help us out, help us find organizations to give us grants, or any anything that you can do to help support us, we're very, very grateful. And I'll put up that link. I believe that's the smartelections.us/donate. That's where you go to donate. And the donations are tax deductible. And there's just lots of ways that you can help us out, not just with a donation, but like I said, really getting the word out about us. And you can also help us out on social media, let people know about what we're up to. You are our PR machine. So we really do appreciate both the work that you do to let people know about us in your networks, your neighbors, your friends. We appreciate all of the volunteers who come to the meetings and really give their time and their energy and letting people know about us. We have lots of social media channels. We are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on TikTok, and we have this other website, countthevote.info, where we put up our public oversight work when we do public records requests and things like that. And all of those links are
down in the section below.
Right, they're all there for you. So,
did you put that I'm a White House correspondent yet? I'm still applying for it. I'm trying to be the White House correspondent for smart legislation.
You can put that in your identification, so you can be our White House correspondent.
Yeah,
we would love to have
I'm trying to get that job.
We would love to have you as our White House correspondent, Benny. I think you're hired on the spot. And then also the smart legislation does meet on Fridays at 12 p.m. And if you go to smartelections.us, the link to sign up is there. I can throw that into the chat right now. And that is really focused on New York legislation. But if you are in New York, please do join us. That's Fridays at noon. And it goes usually for about an hour and a half. That's Eastern time, 12 p.m. Eastern time, and that's for New York legislation. And if you're a New Yorker, we would love to have you join us there. We're doing really great work there. Okay, so I'm gonna just move us along here because I want to get to some of these other examples. So I think the next example, many people are aware of this, but in Northampton, Pennsylvania, there was an ESNS voting machine that miscounted tens of thousands of ballots. And there's a really good New York Times article about this that I will put into the chat. And then I'm actually going to try to play for you this press conference that Allison Green told me about, which is really interesting, where they actually talk. I think this is the point where they actually describe what happens. She says at 2:55, and in the next minute he apologizes for mistakes. I don't know. Let's try that and see. Let's see. So this is, I'll put this article up. It's about what happened in Northampton, Pennsylvania, when they first tried to use the ESNS Express Vote. That's a voting machine that we have really discouraged counties from buying. It's a very problematic machine. And this is the Express Vote problems in Pennsylvania. It's a great article, explains a lot about what happened. And here we have a press conference. Let me just had it up. Okay. I'm not positive I'm going to be able to load this. So I'm not sure I'm logged into Facebook on this channel, but let me try. So what happened after the machine miscounted tens of thousands of votes was ESNS acknowledged that it was the machine's fault. And they had this press conference, which is pretty rare, that they actually come out and just say like, hey, yeah, this is our fault. So let's just listen to this and we'll see what they say. The volume up there, and I'm gonna share this. Okay, screen, audio.
Thank you, Mr. Bloor. My name is Adam Carbolito. I'm Senior Vice President of Product Development for Election Systems and Software. First and foremost, on behalf of my company, I apologize to Northampton County, its administration, county council members, election officials and staff, and most importantly, to the voters of the county. The delay in results reporting and reports of issues working with the touchscreen caused concern for the county and for voters. We view this as completely unacceptable and want you to know that if not for mistakes made by ESNS staff, these issues all could have been avoided. Throughout the night of November 5th and into the morning of November 6th, votes had to be tabulated by election officials from the paper ballots. During voting, each voter had the opportunity to read and verify their ballot before it was cast. And subsequently, those ballots were thoroughly audited, proving the accuracy of the results. After Election Day, all the voting machines were impounded by a court order. While we knew there were issues with the machines, we could not make a final determination on the actual cause and solution until we were able to access the machines. While we awaited access, we activated an all hands on deck team to run several tests at our headquarters in Omaha on the exact same machines and configurations that we have here in Northampton County. We also examined our internal processes. This allowed us to start developing hypotheses for the cause and solution for both issues. On December 5th, the day the court order was lifted, we immediately had a team of ESNS experts on site. The ESNS team, which I was a part of, along with county staff, examined machines and applied the same tests that we were able to conduct at our facilities in Omaha to confirm.
Okay, so they go on for a while there, but if you, and I will put that link into the chat also, let me get that out. So one of the things that they say later in the press conference is that the machine was giving the voter the impression that it was counting accurately, but in fact it was not. So there was no way for the voter to know that their votes were being recorded incorrectly. And that, I think, is one of the most serious things about the problems that developed there in Pennsylvania, was that there was no way for the voters to know. And I'm sorry that audio was pretty low. That's just the way the audio is. It's a Facebook post. So this is the ESNS press conference about the Pennsylvania mistakes. And I actually think it's toward the end that he says, it's a long press conference, I think it's toward the end that he says about how the machines were not giving any indication that they were counting incorrectly. And there was actually, yeah, Mike, we put that link in the chat, and I'm awfully sorry that the audio was so low. Yeah, it's a little, it's a Facebook video, but it's worth listening to. I'll try to come back when we do we always send out an email blast afterwards, and I'll try to get you the exact clip where he talks about how the voters had no way of knowing that there was a problem. And there's one other thing, that there was another problem with those machines, and that had to do with the calibration. It wasn't just that they counted incorrectly, they were literally calibrated wrong. And voters, when they were pressing what they thought was the correct selections, the machine wasn't actually recording them correctly. So, and I'm gonna read this to you. This is very disturbing. So this is for the ESNS spokesperson, said analysts discovered a series of human errors caused problems. For starters, operators at the company's Omaha, Nebraska factory improperly configured some of the touch screens that went to Northampton County. ESNS believes that the problem could have affected as many as 30%. 30% of the 320 machines purchased by the county were potentially calibrated incorrectly. So those were two separate issues that came up in that Northampton disaster. So I want to just talk about two other instances real quick, because we've talked about both of these for a fair amount, but they're worth getting into the list. So Bennie discovered an incorrect total in Memphis. And do you want to briefly talk to us about that?
Yeah, I was looking for the image. I wasn't able to find, but I was late, so I couldn't find it. Yeah, so Memphis had the same similar issues. We use DREs, direct recording electronics, and I still carry a BlackBerry. But back then, I took a picture of a poll tape, trying to document the results before they went to the central tabulator, and I recorded 550 something votes. And when it was tabulated and they sent out the tabulated totals, that same precinct only represented 330 votes. So it had lost 40% of its vote totals. And after the investigation, there were more precincts. I think the memory card said that it had been uploaded, but it hadn't. I think that was the computational error. And if I had not taken a picture of a poll tape, nobody would have known. If I wasn't doing the study to compare it, nobody would have had any idea. So a lot of these, and a lot of these things, they just happen under the radar, and it's not cool anymore when you consider that elections carry the power of the state.
And in that particular instance, they found that was a predominantly African American precinct where the votes disappeared. Where and then they found at least 4 other. You said between 4 and 20 other predominantly African.
20. I think it was 4 to 20. I don't know where they landed, but because it was early voting, and those 4 cards carried 20 precincts. I think it was something like that. Nonetheless, the error was the same. The computer just did not do what its primary job was, and that was to count votes. It didn't work.
And what they found was that at least 1,000 votes were missing in predominantly African American precincts in that instance.
A little bit over 1,000 votes
in Memphis, Tennessee. And then here in New York, I think most of you are aware that there was a very large discrepancy in the June 22nd primary. And again, this was just a basic error on the part of the election officials. They actually included 135,000 test ballots when they ran the results. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Bennie, and like how could something like that happen?
That's squarely where I hang my head at, and that's the reason why I got on the election commission, where you deal with the chain of custody. These processes are arcane, and they can use some serious revisions. There is no way that, I mean, I wish I could get extra $135,000 in my bank. Like, it's just not going to happen, right? There's no process that's going to allow for that type of mishap. So I don't know of any way that you can end up with, that's a lot of paper, right? Like we want to see paper, and I'm a fierce advocate for paper, but I think I know if I had like a extra 10 stacks of clinics, right? Like you would notice something like that. And basically you said 100,000 people voted in the election. And it's just,
I guess what I'm saying is, how could that have happened? How could the election officials have just not cleared the test ballots out of the machine?
Chain of custody. If you don't have a chain of custody, you just see a bunch of paper. It look right. Look, this got a ballot, this stuff filled out. Just send it over here and count it.
But right? aren't there like, isn't there a set order of procedures? Like, you run a test and then you clear the test, and then when you go to run the results, isn't there a test to say like the machine is at 0 right now, and then we're going to run, like, aren't there documents that people have to sign off on, like the machine is at 0 before we run the results?
That is going to vary by county. There should be. I think New York has it. I think the lapse was, like, how do you have a test ballot that doesn't say test ballot on it, like a watermark or something?
Well, it's not. I don't think it's the physical ballots. They had the test ballots. They left the test ballots in the software. Like, they left those numbers in the software.
You shouldn't be able to. No, you shouldn't be able to do that. Once you say there are lots of laws you're breaking if you do that, because you basically have started the election tabulation process before the election has ended. So you have to close everything out. I think you do your logic and accuracy test, then you zero tape, and you print out the zero tape, and it's everything you're saying where you sign that there is a zero tape, and this odometer reading is at 0 right now because the election is happening, but you cannot start tabulating. So while if you have early voting, the early voting period is happening. There's a reason why that moratorium is there, because the election hasn't ended until the polls close on election night. So there should be nothing until if her polls close at 7 p.m., ours close at 7 p.m. It should be sitting at 0, and the audit log should show that everything is at 0 until somebody hits let's add, tabulate. So even if they weren't the actual ballots that just got run through for a second time, there should be some process where you're printing this stuff out. Like you're saying, like you should be able to go to see who signed off on this, who was it actually 0, right? There would be a lot of things that you would need to have hardcore documentation that somebody, went through the step to make sure that didn't happen.
I mean, is that a standard procedure when you're an election commissioner in Shelby County, Tennessee, before the results are run? Usually there's like a 0 tape, right? Somebody's supposed to print a tape that says there's 0 counting happening on the machine so far. Isn't that
that is a standard procedure. It doesn't always get followed. That's why the chain of custody of keeping track of who's responsible for signing to make sure that step did get completed.
So it's chain of custody. It's also a series of forms and documents and things that, protocols that people sign off on.
Yeah. Checkpoints within a process that shows that the process was followed by someone who's under oath and been, has the duty and has been charged to handle that part of the process.
And is the public ever allowed to oversee that process and to say, hey, I'd like to see, that there was a 0 tape before the results were run. I'd like to, is any of that public? How much public oversight is allowed in, these protocols?
I think if you're a deputy registrar in Tennessee, you can. You want you got to be careful. You don't want observers to actually obstruct the process. So I don't think you're allowed to observe each step. But I think there are public records. I think you can submit for a public record to see the machine technician's report or the logic and accuracy test. There are things that you can get that the public can see, but it's still after the fact. It's not during the election.
I know that
it varies by state.
The logic and accuracy tests are sometimes open to the public, because I remember Marilyn Marks talking about observing the logic and accuracy tests. Logic and accuracy tests, for people who don't know, are the tests that are run on the voting machines before everything gets started. And we actually had a comment here from one of our viewers, Jeff Perzone, totally on point. I once had a machine that had not been zeroed out. The chief election inspector notified the election commission, and the machine zeroed out at the polling location. Yeah. Great. So that one was caught. Good work, Jeff. Thanks for your service. So I think we're going to have to leave it there. We have one other instance that I wanted to mention about New York State that we found out. We found out that the New York State scanners have a known issue, which is that if somebody circles the ballot instead of like filling in the oval, the machine will not count that. And the way that they have dealt with that, instead of having to count the ballots by hand, is that they say there is no discrepancy if the machine is counting the way it is programmed to count. So as long as the machine is counting, per its program, meaning it was told not to count that circle, even though that circle is clearly, if you look at it with your eyes in a hand count, you would say, hey, yeah, that's a vote for a candidate. So if you had a hand count and a machine count, there would be a discrepancy. The State Board of Elections has determined in its authority that if the machine is counting the way it was quote unquote programmed, then there is no discrepancy. So the hand count then there wouldn't be an escalation to count further ballots by hand. So that is another instance that we know of that is currently happening here in New York State, where the machines are in fact not counting exactly correctly, and there is in fact nothing being done about it. It is part of the standard procedure.
It also happens that way in Arizona, except the Arizona legislature says that you have to adjudicate it. So I think that was some things when I was in Arizona, they were finding some where the Dominion system, it was circled on the outside of it, but it wasn't counted. And I think they're allowed to count those.
Well, I
state
think that if it's counted by hand, it is allowed to be counted,
yes,
but
through
it's not.
adjudication. You have to adjudicate.
It's allowed to be counted, but in New York, it
Right.
doesn't. It's not an official discrepancy.
Right. It
That's the
varies by
difference.
state.
It varies by state, I'm sure. Right. So this is our program today. This is the examples that we've given you, 5 separate examples of actual evidence cases where election security experts and researchers have determined that in fact the voting machines were not counting correctly. And we hope that this is useful to you in your work and as you go back and talk to your communities about how to trying to make sure that your voting machines, if you're using voting machines, are counting correctly and that you are auditing them and checking them carefully. And we hope that you enjoyed it and found it informational. I know it was a little dense. I saw Vanessa there say like, this is really in the weeds. It's true. It's true. There's weeds everywhere.
And we need a few of these. We need a few of these from time to time.
But I think probably you understand a lot more than you did when you started. So even if you didn't understand everything, I think probably, I'm sure you got a lot. And we thank you very much for being here with us tonight at the Smart Elections Forum. And this is what democracy looks like.
Please sign up now. Our next episode is in the next 2 weeks. I don't know the date, but
September 7th.
September the 7th. That's my brother's birthday. Happy birthday, brother. So sign up and we'll be here with some more content.
Love this from Laura. We should unite for hand-counted audits. Absolutely.
Right.
Thanks for all your work, Laura. Elizabeth, thank you for being here. Thanks to all of you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.